The Chiefs had to do it. They made a big roster move and added a couple more to boot just before the Veterans Report. We're going to go over all of it today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Chiefs had to go in.
From the land of the free.
They made a move. The Chiefs had to go and do it. They made a move on Justyn Ross pre-camp. We're going to get into all the details. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, as well as the founder of RGR Football on YouTube. You want to check that out at rgrfootball.com, as well as NFL33.com, our Substack for league-wide information. You also want to go over to Rogue APC, where you can get all the athletic matrix and draft credentials, credentials, everything that you need to get ready and understand what rookie class is going to do this season as well as past seasons as well. It's all available over there. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free on every platform. Thanks for making us your first listen. Go check out another Locked On show like the Draft Show, for instance, and do that because Justyn Ross was just in this last draft, and he was also a player that we thought could go drafted, did not, and through the number of injuries, to tell you the truth, the Kansas City Chiefs were actually the team that he chose to sign with. That has a lot of bearing on this situation because Justyn Ross had the opportunity to go anywhere. A lot of suitors, as we understand it, more than 2/3 of the league was interested in Justyn Ross in the post-draft frenzy that is the undrafted free agent market. He ends up coming to Kansas City. Now, this is Monday afternoon, the day before the Veterans Report. And the Chiefs made a move this afternoon to put Justyn Ross onto IR already. Now, I thought that this cleanup procedure was going to be something he could come back with. I don't know that that's the case. We're going to have to go over all the rules. Chris will be back later in the week and we'll verify that. But I do believe that this means they're going to have to do something else with Justyn Ross this year. Either going to be training him on IR. He could come back to the practice squad. I understand. We're going to get through the details later in the week, but it's really about the impact on him as a rookie. You'd really hoped, because of all his upside, that he would be able to get out there and really make some progress. A kid that I think the injury concerns were a lot for what this is based on. Teams were a little bit shy, but still very interested at the UDFA level in signing a talent like Justyn Ross to get them on the roster, see what they could do. Now, this allows him, I think, in a delayed reaction, a nice ability to spend at least some time on IR getting healthy. Then he can start his NFL career and begin. In the meantime, he can learn the Chiefs playbook. He can sit in on meetings. He can get to know his teammates both in the wide receiver core as well as all the quarterbacks, because he will be playing with multiple quarterbacks. That's just the way it's going to go. And that is, as these alarms go off that I'm getting more news, there are a couple of other signs. We'll get to those here coming up in a minute. The ability for Justyn Ross to actually be on IR and learn all this is going to help him create that transition time. And if they can do all the things that they need, that extended time frame of rehab is really going to help him, I think, progress that much more. We heard Jody Fortson talk about the rehab procedures and the Chiefs training staff, the athletic training staff. That's different than strength conditioning. For those of you who aren't really familiar with the way that it all works, athletic trainers are trauma-based, ER-based. They're not physicians, but they are trained on anatomy, on rehab procedures, on intense traumatic injury, because they are the first line of first responders on the athletic field. Now, you also have actual physicians that will then be in terms of oversight for repair and surgical, et cetera, et cetera. But the athletic trainers are really the paramedics of the sports world. And they kind of bridge that gap between initial reaction trauma diagnosis, triage, you may say, and the rehab process. They oversee that as well, along with very specific physician input, physical therapy input, massage input, all kinds of those kind of specialties. But what Jody Fortson clued us into yesterday is that it really was the athletic training staff that helped drive him through his rehab. That will actually be the same staff that Justyn Ross will work with, even though he's a rookie and will be on IR. He'll be able to have access to the facility, to that staff, and to all of their experience. And so this really does put the pressure on hold and put the rehab up front in a way that allows Justyn Ross to, I think, achieve his best physical potential with this time off, where he can actually take that and do something productive with it, get his body right. I do think that is in the cards. Now, I thought this cleanup was not that much of an impact, and I thought he would still have a chance to do this. Evidently, it is more significant than we thought. And we talked about this scenario as a magical IR placement. This is actually a legit one. It is not that last minute kind of thing. It clears the way for the battle for the wide receiver group, especially with Josh Gordon, Darius Fountain. Now maybe Justin Watkins gets a chance to get in that fight a little bit more in depth. We'll talk about that as it comes along. There's going to be more updates. And the Chiefs also made a couple of other moves, ones that maybe you weren't expecting, and certainly are going to stress me out in terms of pronouncing them. We'll get to those in just a second, because I got to tell you, whether it's 2020, you just want to change the past, or you just need a little help getting through those stressful expenses, you can find that help right now today with our newest sponsor, Dave. Dave is the banking app that can help you get $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, to pay your bills, to buy a wedding gift, or whatever comes up. You can finally tackle those expenses that are stressing you out and get rid of those hangups. There's no interest. There's no credit check. Millions of people have already downloaded the app and got their savings already with extra cash. So pitch in, get some extra help your future self out right now. All you have to do is go download the Dave app from any app store. That's DAVE, like the guy's name. Sign up for the extra cash account and get $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, you go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking is provided by Evolve, a member FDIC. Your future you will thank you. The future Justyn Ross is going to have some time to get to that point as well. A couple of things are a little bit more immediate on the Chiefs front, and that is he's not the only move that they made the day before camp officially opens to the veterans and they report. So this is just off of rookie camp, and though it's a tough break for him, I think there's plenty of room there. They also decided, hey, we have a couple of gaps. We have a guy who's not coming to camp right now. I think what the signings additionally did, Ross going is one, Orlando Brown is another. They signed two tackles, David Steinmetz and Evan Zizerchek, I believe. Zizerchek. I'm going to go with that and say that the K is silent. Evan, please let me know if I'm absolutely wrong, because I'm not that stylish with this. But Zizerchek, whatever you want to call him, and Steinmetz, both offensive tackles, guys that can fill in and provide that depth. I think we know who the candidates are to actually get play time and reps with the ones and the twos and even the threes. Zizerchek in particular is a guy that has bounced around 4 teams in a year, 2 practice squads, not a candidate to start most likely, but somebody to fill out the rest of the roster for camp and be there as good quality depth that's been around the league a little bit. And you can see being there in case of emergency. So I think this makes a lot of sense. That specific pair of moves, both at the offensive tackle position, one for Ross and one for Orlando Brown, tells me that they do not expect Orlando Brown to be in camp anytime soon. They have to make sure that they can take all the reps, that they can fill all the demo teams, get everything done that they need to do, so that you're not affecting negatively the other defense, the ones that you're going to go into, and particularly what you're going to have to do in the lower ranks as you try to evaluate talent. You have to have all the roster spots filled so that you can actually put out the 4th stringers, as well as maybe a couple of extra guys that aren't fighting for roster spots, but they're fighting for a career somewhere else. Any tape that you can get on in this preseason for either of these tackles is going to help them either catch on to this practice squad or maybe even a 53-man roster elsewhere, certainly a practice squad elsewhere. These are 2 guys that are going to be able to get a little bit of a look this preseason, and that is good for them. It's good for the Chiefs as well, because you have to have the depth there in order to get that done. Now, this is an inference. I don't have any insider information yet. I have not confirmed the Chiefs thinking about Orlando Brown as we sit here this hour. it is relatively fresh, this news. So I am going with just my interpretation of it. I have not confirmed this, but it does tell me that Orlando Brown does not indicate that he's going to be in camp tomorrow on Tuesday on time on the 26th. Now, I told you last week, I'm not so sure that that's that huge of a deal. In my mind, he's got a window here of the next, say, 14 days. By August 10th, I think he needs to be in camp. That's a couple of days before the first preseason game, which is August 13th. And I think that's really got to be the bottom line, so he can get some of the rust knocked off. He can get in play shape, and he can get a couple of things done before he has to. This, I think, is key for not only Orlando, but before the process. But these signal what is going on behind the scenes, and you have to kind of read the tea leaves. I'd like to get Chris's opinion. He's still out dealing with a personal issue. He will be back later in the week. We will have that for you, and we'll get his rundown because he'll know the cap implications. He'll know all the rules. I don't study the bylaws as well as he does, so I'm going here just with my initial reaction on the field and what that says about what the front office is thinking, about where Orlando's at and what he's at least communicated. Now, there is a possibility that he could show up on time and just hasn't communicated that to the team. But it's pretty unlikely. These moves, replacing both Justyn Ross, who they put to IR, and him, because he's the only other unaccounted for body right now at camp, it's a sign. It is not a glowing statement. It is not like a definitive, hey, I'm not going to come to camp for X number of days or until X date. But it is an inference that we have to make. And quite frankly, we have to be prepared for. I do think that in his best interest, he will be in, and I still have optimism. And I will, until I have a reason not to, I will maintain optimism that he will be in camp at some point, prepared enough to play week 1. That is the overall goal. That is for him the first payday that he'll really miss. If you miss the bylaws, the veterans make about $2,900 a week in camp. So not exactly anything close to their normal salaries. It is about game checks in this situation. And you have to see them continuing to move forward until you get to the game check so that you can get what your contract says you're due. So I do think that this is a treading water kind of situation. But for Orlando Brown, I think it only signals to him from the team standpoint that, hey, if you're not going to be here, we are going to move on. We're going to prepare the guys that we have, and we're going to bring in more bodies to be backups and to climb up that depth chart. If you decide that you're not going to participate, that's on you. You will have, this is the way that the league works. You have what you're going to have. Your contract offer was in, you declined it. Your franchise tag is out there. You've declined to sign it to this point. This is another subtle way that the front office is saying, Orlando, this is on you. Go make your decision, and we're going to help you get there, but this is what it is. So what does that do for the rest of how this initial look at the offense goes? We're going to get into that on the backside of this after we talk to a couple pals. So the bigger impact overall is that for Orlando Brown, this is a danger zone. It's not falling off a cliff. It's not copacetic. It's not normal operating procedure. It is definitely in between and a bit of a danger zone. Because if he should be continuing to train, if he were to get hurt or anything like that and can't actually show up to camp and can't play, that throws a year out the window that he cannot accrue on his veteran status. That is a problem for him. It obviously throws out a number of things in terms of monetary reasons, finance reasons, that he won't collect game checks. That's a problem for him. So not only is the impetus and the stress on Orlando Brown to get this done, it's also for his own best risk assessment to get this done. Sign the tag, come in, and get to work. There is no other way around it. So your opportunity has passed you by in order to reach a negotiation. You're just going to have to get it done. I think that the Chiefs signaling this, and it is from the statement that they made, it was very simplistic. Listen, we put Justyn on IR and we signed 2 tackles. It leaked out a little bit before because of the agents. But in terms of the actual transactions, the team isn't making a big stink about this. They're not coming out and making statements, he decided not to show up, so we're going to go get a replacement. Like, this is very much just the cost of doing business. This is very much routine and rote. Hey, if we don't have enough bodies at X position, we have to backfill them, period. It doesn't matter if a guy stubs his toe walking into Scanlon Hall tomorrow or he decides not to show on his franchise tag. Either way, they have to have enough bodies to accomplish practice, to accomplish progress towards the season. And that's what it is at the end of the day. So he's put himself in this position, but the team has to start looking at options. Now, we heard from Darian Kinnard a little bit with the dyed hair and everything else, and kudos to him for making that commitment. I do think what it signals is that overall, they're ready to roll. And I'm really interested to see starting, probably not till Wednesday. The veterans report Tuesday, and they'll have meetings. I don't think they'll be on the field or we'll see any kind of indication of what the lineup will be. But come Wednesday, I believe that's an early morning practice, just like always. We should have an idea. Who are they going to roll with? I think it's going to be Jaren Christian, who ended up with the ones at left tackle in OTAs. So I think they'll pick up from there. I'm sure they'll give other guys some looks, including Kinnard. But I do think that that's the way they're going to start. The question is, does Wiley get the reps with the ones at right tackle, which is kind of my expectation, and how quickly does Kinnard come in? So if that's the lineup, if it's Wiley, Trey, Creed, Joe, and then over to Jaren Christian, then we have an idea of how they've assessed to this point. And the key is that they've then assessed that Jaren Christian is worth giving good reps to, important reps to. If they come out and we see Joe Thuney at left tackle, and my guess would be that Allegretti is probably in there at left guard. My thought is they're still trying to figure that out, or they haven't seen enough from the options at tackle. And that would include Jaren Christian. That would include Darian Kinnard. Now, you could see even a big flop. Joe to left tackle. You could see Wiley go to left guard. Leave Allegretti as the back, the swing interior guy, and then let Kinnard play right. That's an option as well. And if we do see any of these combinations, I expect to see all of them. One kind of begets the other because you're trying to find the best five that you can play right now without Orlando Brown. Now, I think the offensive line group understands where he's coming from. Creed Humphrey came out and had some positive statements about Orlando and his support for him. Now Creed and Trey did the big offseason thing with Mitch Schwartz and Duke Manyweather, getting down there at O-line masterminds. That's important stuff. But in the back of your mind, you always have, hey, you know, what's going on with my guys? And what he had to say was, quote, Orlando's a special player, just like Joe is. I haven't really talked to Orlando much this offseason and everything. It's kind of been giving him some space, letting him work through that, letting him handle his business. Whenever he shows up, I know he'll be ready to roll. He's going to be one of those guys that comes in ready. I know that, end quote. That is Creed Humphrey talking about Orlando Brown. And I think that really says it all about where the offensive line group feels they are. They're going to support him because they understand that the business side of this only comes along every contract year or so. There are a couple other things that can kind of jump in the way of that, but for the most part, that's what they're trying to get done. And they're all going to be in that situation at some point. So the support for Orlando Brown on the offensive line, I think, is going to be key. It also goes to say that there's more open competition right now. So there could be even more things going on that we will hear about in the coming days as the veterans report tomorrow. So 26 is report day. I don't think we're going to see much until around the lunch hour. We'll have more for you after that when we get a little bit of a read on that. And hopefully, as the evening goes on Monday night, we'll get a little bit more feedback. We should have, my guess is, in reaction to this, you will see the agent leak some kind of information, some kind of opinion, or through some insider, quote unquote, around the league. We'll have an idea what the reaction is to them signing more tackles. I do think it will. It probably not. It shouldn't rattle Orlando Brown. None of these guys are in a position to compete with Orlando Brown. But hopefully it will rattle them enough to say, hey, listen, we're going to show up at some point before training camp, some kind of statement that tells you where they're coming from. This is a little bit of gamesmanship at this point. And unfortunately, this is the time of the year that you don't want this. You don't want to have to make these statements. You don't want to have to play these games right now. You don't want to have to go out and sign guys off the street that you hadn't planned on having to need. So that is an issue. It's not, a critical, red klaxon going off in the background, but it is something to keep an eye on. And it is something that can then become bigger and hopefully not become a distraction, not only for the guys that are in camp, particularly along the offensive line, but hopefully not in the media either. Because while Say Joe can be, something that filters out some of the noise from the outside world, you certainly don't want to let that have a chance to grow. So we should have an update for you tomorrow. Matt Derrick's going to be back with us for Wednesday. We'll have a reaction to that as well and get Matt's insider look at what's going on. A lot to come here and probably more updates. So make sure that you like, sub, and hit the bell on YouTube. Make sure you get subscribed on all the audio platforms. Please check out RGR Football for me. Check out NFL33.com, where I do the non-Chiefs work around the league with the rest of my staff. We're really excited. It's going to be a great season. Thank you for all of your time, and we'll be back with you tomorrow.